It happened in the blink of an eye, but I'll never forget the color. Bright, searing white industrial paint, thick and dripping, running down my daughter's face, soaking into her shirt, her hair, her hands. Her small fingers twitched in shock, still holding the paintbrush she'd been using a moment before. She stood frozen on the sidewalk, her canvas knocked over, her art destroyed. The world around her suddenly silent except for the sickening splatter of liquid hitting concrete. For a moment, I didn't move. I couldn't. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. Then Ava turned to me confused, scared, her eyes wide with panic, and that's when I ran. I dropped everything, ran down the front steps, and fell to my knees beside her. Ava, oh my God, what happened? I cried, wiping the paint from her cheeks, checking her eyes, her mouth. She was shaking. Her whole body was trembling. Her favorite hoodie, sky blue with little clouds she had painted herself, was soaked and stained. Her paints, which she'd been using so carefully to make a rainbow for the neighborhood kids, were now a ruined, muddy mess. And then I heard it, a slow clap of sandals on pavement. Karen, standing with a paint bucket in one hand, the lid in the other, her mouth curled into that smirk I'd come to know far too well. She didn't even try to hide what she'd done. She looked down at my daughter, still frozen, drenched, broken, and then at me. She ruined the community's colors, Karen said coldly. So I fixed it. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. The rage in my chest was rising so fast it felt like fire under my skin. My child, my sweet, gentle, disabled daughter, had just been assaulted. And the woman who did it was proud. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't hiding. She stood there like she'd just watered the plants. I pulled Ava into my arms, her paint-stained hands clinging to me, and held her tight. Neighbors began peeking from their windows. Some walked by and paused. No one spoke. No one stepped in. No one stopped her. And in that moment, something shattered inside me, not just fear, but the belief that cruelty had a limit, that people wouldn't go that far, that my daughter could be safe in a place that promised community. But I was wrong. I never thought someone would assault my daughter and then blame her for it. Before it all turned ugly, before the paint, the humiliation, and the cold stares, I truly believed we had found a safe haven. A fresh start. Parkside Bloom was one of those neighborhoods that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. Manicured lawns, picket fences, cheerful pastel houses, all lined up like they'd been arranged by hand. The community signs promised peaceful living and pride in neighborhood. And for a single mother like me, raising a daughter with a disability, those words meant everything. After years of moving from apartment to apartment, fighting for ramps, battling landlords who saw my daughter's needs as an inconvenience, this place felt like hope with a mailbox. Ava was 7 when we moved in. 7, with eyes the color of the ocean on a cloudy day, and a heart so big it seemed too wide for her small frame. She was born with spastic diplegia, a form of cerebral palsy that affected the muscles in her legs. She used forearm crutches to walk and moved slower than other kids her age, but she never let that define her. Where others saw limitations, Ava saw beauty. Her world wasn't shaped by what she couldn't do. It was painted by what she could imagine. And oh, did she paint! From the moment she was old enough to grip a brush, she transformed every piece of paper she touched. Her colors were bold, her strokes full of life. She painted stars with 7 points and flowers that floated in the sky. Art, she once told me, is how I tell the world I'm not sad about being different. And it was true. Her art was joy, freedom, and defiance all at once. She would sit for hours painting on small canvases or taping butcher paper to the kitchen floor. She said color made her feel strong, and I never questioned it. When we found Parkside Bloom, Ava lit up. The neighborhood had wide sidewalks, a small park, and her favorite, a long white wall that lined the back of the community garden. "That's a canvas, Mom," she'd said, eyes gleaming. "It's asking for a rainbow." I laughed, thinking how innocent her dream was. I didn't yet understand how dangerous innocence could be in a place obsessed with conformity. Still, our first weeks, they were beautiful. Ava made fast friends with the girl next door, Mia, who loved to draw with chalk. They'd spend afternoons making giant chalk cities on the sidewalk, each house personalized with stick figures of families, animals, even ramps. Ava painted a small welcome sign and taped it to our door, complete with glittery letters and a hand-drawn sun. I watched her bloom in ways I hadn't seen before. More confident, more independent. She even started talking about joining the school's art club. The neighbors, at first, seemed pleasant enough. Mrs. Davison, across the street, waved every morning. The couple on the corner complimented Ava's sidewalk drawings. And there was Karen, who lived 2 units down, always trimming her roses, always dressed neatly, always with that polite but frosty smile. Karen didn't say much in the beginning. She nodded, occasionally commented on the weather, and once even told Ava her sunflower painting wasn't too bad. I mistook her indifference for quietness. I thought maybe she just wasn't friendly, but not hostile. I was wrong. Still, in those first few weeks, I allowed myself to breathe. I even signed Ava up for weekend art classes at the nearby rec center. Every Sunday morning, we'd pack her brushes, paints, and smock into her backpack, sky blue, her favorite, and she'd wheel her art cart down the ramp with a determined grin. She wanted to decorate the whole community one day. Art makes places feel like home, she said. Looking back now, I think that's what triggered everything. Ava's joy, her confidence, her unapologetic color in a world built on beige fences and matching mulch. She wasn't just living here, she was thriving. And for people like Karen, nothing is more threatening than someone who dares to stand out and belong all at once. But I didn't see it then. I only saw a child finally at peace, a neighborhood that looked like healing, and a wall just waiting for a rainbow. The first red flag wasn't a scream or a slap. It was a whisper, a sideways glance, a smile that didn't reach the eyes. It came one afternoon while Ava and I were out front painting small flower pots to line our porch. The day was warm, the sky cloudless, and Ava had decided that each pot would represent a different season: bright yellows for spring, deep reds for fall, icy blues for winter. Her brush moved slowly but surely, each stroke deliberate. Her tongue peeked out slightly when she focused, a habit she'd had since she was 3. Karen passed by on her usual mid-afternoon walk, wearing her visor and holding a clipboard like always. I smiled politely. She paused, looked at the pots, then at Ava. "Interesting choices," she said coolly. "Not exactly community colors, but I suppose children will be children." I blinked. "They're just for our porch," I replied, still smiling. Karen nodded tightly. "Of course. Just remember we have a palette. The HOA prefers neutral tones, earthy colors, not so much neon." Ava's brush stopped mid-stroke. She looked up at me, confused. I gave Karen a polite, firm nod. "Thanks. We'll keep that in mind." She walked away without another word. It didn't seem like much at the time, just a harmless comment. But it was the way she said it, like Ava's joy was disruptive, like our little flower pots had somehow violated the neighborhood's aesthetic purity. And more importantly, it was the way Ava went quiet for the rest of the afternoon. After that, the comments came more frequently. One morning, we found a printed HOA letter taped to our door. It wasn't official, no logo, no signature, just typed words in Times New Roman font. "Please refrain from leaving children's drawings visible from the street. Some neighbors have expressed concern over visual consistency." Visual consistency. As if Ava's chalk butterflies and cartoon suns were graffiti. As if her sidewalk masterpieces were somehow bringing down property values. I asked around. None of the other kids had received a notice. In fact, the boys down the street had drawn an entire racetrack in chalk with flames and monster trucks, and their parents hadn't heard a word. It was targeted, and we knew it. Then came the brushes with Ava directly. One weekend, she and Mia had set up a little art show outside, hanging their paintings on string tied between porch railings. It was innocent, adorable. They made little name tags and offered painted rocks to anyone passing by. I brought them lemonade and watched from the steps as neighbors walked by, smiling. Then Karen came out. She didn't smile. She didn't even look at the art. Instead, she stepped carefully around the display as if it were hazardous and muttered under her breath, loud enough for all of us to hear, "This isn't a flea market." Ava froze. Mia looked down. I stood up, ready to say something, but Karen had already slipped back inside, shutting her door with a little too much force. That night, Ava asked, "Mom, do my paintings make people mad?" It shattered me. I held her and told her the truth. "No, baby, they make people feel. And some people are scared of that." But I started noticing the fear settling into her. She began second-guessing herself. "Are these colors okay?" she'd ask. Or, "Should I hide my paintings today?" Karen's presence hovered over us like a shadow. She started reporting ridiculous violations, unapproved porch decorations, sidewalk obstructions, unregistered easels. One violation claimed Ava's small easel, which we set up for 20 minutes on our lawn, was a hazard to pedestrian traffic. The HOA sent a warning, citing a concerned resident. No names were given, but the handwriting on the envelope looked suspiciously familiar. Then came the biggest slap. Karen petitioned to repaint the community mural wall. That wall, the one Ava had dreamed of transforming into a rainbow, had become a small community project over the months. Kids had started adding little things to it. Handprints, stars, messages of kindness. Ava had painted a sun in the corner and written the words, "Color is for everyone," in bright teal. Karen called it visual clutter. At the next HOA meeting, she proposed that the mural wall be repainted back to its original neutral tone to restore community harmony. Harmony! Only 3 people voted against it. The rest, eager to avoid confrontation or stay on Karen's good side, agreed. The wall was painted beige the next day. Ava cried for hours. She watched from our window as her son disappeared under strokes of flat tan. She said it felt like her voice was being buried, like someone had erased her on purpose. She wasn't wrong. Karen never yelled. She never cursed. Her hate came in policy, in preferences, in carefully chosen words like appropriate and unified. She didn't throw stones, she passed motions, and slowly, she was making Ava feel like an outsider in the place that promised belonging. These were the first red flags. But we hadn't seen the worst yet, because soon she'd stop hiding behind words altogether. The change was slow at first, almost imperceptible, like a drop in temperature that you only notice once your hands begin to tremble. Karen's comments had shifted from subtle disapproval to clear contempt, and the space Ava once considered her canvas was turning into a battleground. What was once a quiet tension in the air became something colder, sharper, and deeply personal. It started with the photographs. Ava had been outside drawing chalk flowers on the sidewalk, sunflowers with thick green stems and round smiling faces. Her walker was propped beside her, a small tray clipped to the handles holding her chalk pieces. I was watching her from the window, as I always did, when I saw Karen emerge from her front door. She wasn't wearing her usual visor or holding her clipboard this time, just her phone. She stood across the street, arms folded, camera raised, taking picture after picture of Ava, not of the sidewalk, not the drawing, her. At first, I thought she might be documenting another violation for the HOA, but then I saw the expression on her face, not annoyed, not even smug. It was something far worse, calculated. She was collecting something, keeping a record. I stepped outside and called across the lawn, "Is there a reason you're photographing my daughter?" Karen lowered the phone, but didn't look flustered. "Public sidewalk," she said calmly. "If you didn't want people noticing her art, maybe you shouldn't put it out here like an exhibition." "She's a child." I snapped. "A child who lives here, just like everyone else." Karen gave a tight smile. "Then maybe teach her to follow the rules like everyone else." That night, another note appeared on our door. "Please be advised, continual use of the sidewalk for personal displays violates HOA policy. Residents have expressed discomfort." Discomfort. That word lingered like poison. Ava wasn't spray painting walls or blocking driveways. She was making sidewalk chalk drawings. Temporary, washable, joyful. But Karen had turned her joy into a weapon, and the HOA, either too afraid or too indifferent, was letting her. The neighbors began pulling away too. Mrs. Davison stopped waving in the mornings. The young couple who once complimented Ava's drawings now looked down when they passed. Mia's mother quietly asked if they could take a break from playdates. "It's not personal," she had said, "but we just want to avoid neighborhood drama." Ava asked me later, "Did I do something wrong? Did the sidewalk get mad at me?" "No, baby," I whispered. "You're just too bright for people who like to live in the dark." But how could she understand? Karen's campaign of control escalated in every possible way. The HOA began citing us for things we never imagined were violations. Improperly stored mobility aids for Ava's walker. Unapproved decorative signage when she taped a Happy Spring sign with painted bunnies on our window. A notice even came claiming our grass was overgrown when our lawn was freshly mowed, only slightly taller than Karen's own. Then came the whispers. Karen, it seemed, had been talking. One evening, while picking up mail, I overheard two board members speaking just around the corner from the mail kiosk. They didn't know I was there. "She's making it about the daughter again." Well, that kid does get special treatment. I mean, paint on everything sidewalk chalk, walkers outside. Karen says it's making the place look like a therapy center. I stood frozen, mail in hand, throat burning. Special treatment. That's what they thought? That a child using a walker and drawing sunflowers was bringing down the quality of their beige paradise? I walked away before they saw me, but their words echoed through my head like thunder. The final straw before the incident was a morning like any other. Ava had woken up excited to show me her newest idea, a paint path to welcome spring. She'd made small handprint signs, each with a positive word. Hope, joy, light, peace. She taped them along the edge of our walkway and left one final painting in the grass, her own footprints, traced and painted in rainbow colors, leading from our porch to the sidewalk. She called it her walk of welcome. By the afternoon, it was gone. All of it. The signs had been torn down. The painted footprints had been scrubbed with what smelled like bleach. The grass was faded, the paintbrushes snapped in half and left in the dirt. And in the middle of the walkway, in red spray paint, crude, rushed, someone had written, "Keep your colors inside." Ava stared at it unmoving, her lips parted, but no sound came. She simply looked down at her hands, still stained from her painting earlier that morning, and whispered, "I'm sorry." That word, sorry, cut deeper than any slur or insult ever could. She wasn't sorry because she thought she did something wrong. She was sorry for existing. And that broke me. I filed a complaint. The HOA investigated and concluded they had no way of confirming who vandalized the property. No witnesses, they claimed. No cameras. No accountability. I asked if they planned to remove the spray paint message, and the board president replied, "We don't have funds allocated for cosmetic cleanup of non-structural areas." Non-structural. To them, it wasn't hate speech. It was just graffiti. And Ava's dignity? Not worth their time. That night, I sat with Ava as she stared blankly at her coloring book. She didn't color. She didn't speak. Her crayons lay untouched on the table. And that's when I knew we had crossed a line. This wasn't just hostility. It wasn't about HOA rules or porch decorations anymore. This was targeted destruction. Karen wasn't trying to control the neighborhood. She was trying to erase Ava from it. And the next time she struck, she wouldn't just scrub paint from the grass or tear down signs. She'd go after my daughter directly, and no one would stop her. It was a Saturday, the kind of warm, golden morning that whispered of new beginnings. The sun hung low and gentle, casting long shadows on the sidewalk as a soft breeze tugged at the leaves. Birds chirped from power lines, kids laughed in the distance, and for a few hours the world felt safe again. Ava had woken up early, too early, honestly, but with that unmistakable glint of purpose in her eyes. She'd been working all week on a new project, a gift to the neighborhood. After the mural wall had been repainted beige, and after her handprint path had been destroyed, Ava had retreated inward, quieter than usual. But 2 nights ago, while brushing her hair before bed, she had whispered, "Mom, what if I paint something just for the mailbox area?" so everyone sees it, like kindness when they get their letters. She wanted to paint the concrete edge around the community mailbox just a strip of soft color, pastel blue and yellow flowers, with vines curling around the base. Nothing loud, nothing garish. Soft and friendly, she called it. Something that could live there, like a smile. I hesitated, of course, after everything with Karen and the HOA, but Ava had already sketched the whole thing in her notebook, and her joy was the kind that couldn't be denied. So that Saturday morning, we went outside together. I helped her set up her stool, propped her walker beside her, laid out the paints she had carefully mixed. She dipped her brush into the first color, humming under her breath. I stayed for a while, then went back inside to make us lunch, peeking out every few minutes through the window. Each time I looked, she was just in her element, focused, serene, free. Then I saw the shadow. At first, I assumed it was a passing neighbor, but the posture was too rigid, too still. I squinted, and my stomach dropped. Karen. She stood about 10 feet behind Ava, arms crossed, her gaze fixed on the painting like it was an insult. I could see her mouth moving, but the window muffled her voice. Ava didn't turn. She was still painting, her brush moving delicately. I threw the dish towel on the counter and moved toward the door. Something wasn't right. Before I reached the porch, I saw it. Karen stepped forward. She was holding something. A large, white 5-gallon bucket, the kind used for exterior house paint. And then, like a nightmare unfolding in slow motion, she lifted it high above her head. I screamed, but it was too late. The entire bucket of thick, cold, white paint came crashing down over Ava's head. It hit her crown first, the contents splashing with a wet, violent splat. The force knocked her sideways off the stool. She let out a sharp scream, confused, shocked, hurt. Paint streamed down her face, into her mouth, her eyes. Her little hands clawed at her eyes, smearing more paint across her cheeks and chin. Her walker tipped over beside her. The brush clattered to the ground. Her artwork, half-finished flowers, was destroyed in an instant. I ran. I don't remember opening the door. I don't remember my feet hitting the pavement. I just remember the sound of my daughter sobbing, guttural, terrified, choking on paint and tears. I dropped to my knees beside her. Ava, baby, it's okay, I've got you. She was shaking, gasping, paint dripping off her in heavy, wet globs. It was in her ears, her hair, her clothes. Her canvas was ruined. The bucket had left a trail where it rolled away. The sidewalk was a slick mess of white, covering everything. Karen stood nearby, holding the empty bucket with both hands, completely expressionless. What the hell did you do? I shouted, cradling Ava to my chest, wiping her eyes with my sleeve. Karen shrugged. She ruined the community's aesthetic, she said, as if explaining why she'd moved a trash bin. I'm just restoring it. She's a child. I yelled. She was painting flowers. That mailbox is concrete, Karen. It's not yours. Karen's eyes narrowed slightly, but her tone stayed calm. This isn't an art school. If you want to finger paint, do it in your home. This is a community, and she's ruining it. She's 7 and she's disabled. I screamed. You poured a bucket of paint on a disabled child. I corrected a mistake, she replied coldly. This is what happens when people think rules don't apply to them. Neighbors had begun gathering. From porches, behind blinds. Some came closer, phones in hand. Watching, not helping. Not one person came to Ava's side. Not one person told Karen to stop. It wasn't until one man, Mr. Hartley, retired, quiet, rarely seen, stepped forward that I realized the silence had finally become unbearable. Karen, he said slowly, you assaulted a child. Karen turned her head toward him. I enforced a boundary. He shook his head. No, you crossed one. Someone else, one of the teen boys from across the lot, had been recording. He hadn't spoken a word, but his phone was pointed directly at Karen, catching every second. I caught his eye. He nodded solemnly, then looked back at the screen. I scooped Ava into my arms. Her sobs were soft now, tired. Her fingers gripped the fabric of my shirt, sticky with paint. Her eyes were swollen. My arms trembled as I carried her to the car. I'll be back. I said no one in particular. But first, I'm taking her to the ER. Karen didn't stop me, didn't say a word, didn't even look guilty. At the hospital, they flushed Ava's eyes, cleaned her ears, checked her skin for reactions. The doctor, after hearing what had happened, asked me 3 times if I wanted to call the police. My voice cracked when I answered, yes, absolutely. I showed them the pictures, the paint stains on her clothes, the cuts on her palm from where she fell. They took a statement. They took samples of the paint. They gave Ava a lollipop. But no one could give her back what she lost. That night, she barely spoke. She didn't ask for a story. She didn't want cartoons. She just stared at the ceiling, whispering, I didn't mean to make the sidewalk ugly. I held her hand until she fell asleep. Then I went into the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and screamed into a towel until my throat burned. Because there is a grief that comes with injustice. But there's a deeper grief, the kind that wraps itself around your soul when you watch your child suffer and no one steps in. Karen poured paint on my daughter because she saw her as a stain, not a person, because in her twisted mind, color meant chaos, and difference meant disorder. But what Karen didn't know, she didn't just pour paint. She poured gasoline on a fire she couldn't control. And now, I was going to burn down every wall that let her do this and walk away. The paint washed off, but the damage didn't. For days after the incident, Ava barely spoke. Her brushes sat untouched on her desk. The small easel she once carried around like a second limb now leaned silently in a corner, covered by an old towel. When I asked if she wanted to paint, she just shook her head. Her spark, the joy that lived in color, had dimmed to a flicker. She wouldn't even go outside. She'd peer through the curtains sometimes, staring at the sidewalk where the paint had soaked into the cracks and dried like a scar. The HOA had someone power wash the area 2 days later, not because they were outraged at what happened, but because the visual disruption had made its way into a neighborhood WhatsApp group. That's what it always came down to in this place. Not people, not children, just appearances. I called the police again and followed up on the report. The officer who had spoken to us at the hospital said it was being processed. It's a serious accusation, he told me. We're gathering statements. But she's claiming it was an accident, that she slipped, that the paint fell by mistake. Then how do you explain her telling my daughter she ruined the community's colors? I asked, teeth clenched. He hesitated. Without witnesses or video, it's your word against hers. That was the moment something inside me hardened. Because a child had been assaulted. On camera. In front of a dozen neighbors. And somehow, she was still walking free while my daughter was too afraid to pick up a paintbrush. I didn't wait. I walked straight to Karen's house. I wasn't there to scream. I wasn't there to beg. I was there to make sure she looked me in the eyes and felt the weight of what she had done. She opened the door slowly, arms folded, like she'd been expecting me. That smug calm was still there, but a flicker of something else too. Annoyance? Guilt? No, it was boredom. Like my outrage was just noise. I thought you might come by, she said flatly. I stepped onto the porch. You poured paint on my daughter, Karen. You traumatized a disabled child. And you still think you're the victim here? Karen sighed, leaning on the doorframe. Your daughter was vandalizing community property. Again, I simply tried to stop it, and the paint spilled. That's not assault, it's unfortunate. I stared at her, stunned. You poured it, Karen. You lifted the bucket over her head. You think we don't see you? You think this place owes you silence. Karen's expression didn't change. You moved here and started making everything about her. About you. Every week it's some new display, chalk, signs, murals. This is a quiet neighborhood. We have rules for a reason. She's a child, I said, voice low. A disabled child. And her art is her voice. She's drawing attention, Karen snapped. And not the good kind. People are uncomfortable. She makes us look like a circus. I stepped closer, fire in my chest. She makes you uncomfortable because she's not afraid to be seen. And because your perfect little beige world doesn't have room for joy you can't control. Karen's eyes narrowed. You're making a scene. No, I said, stepping back. You made the scene. And I'm going to make sure everyone sees it for what it was. I turned and left without another word. I took Ava's ruined hoodie and stained jeans, placed them in a box along with a printed copy of the police report, and mailed them to the HOA with a letter that read, "This is what your silence condones." I attended the next HOA meeting in person. Karen wasn't there, but I stood in front of that room full of quiet stares and read every word. About the paint, about the fear, about the child they refused to protect. And then I pulled out Ava's ruined painting, folded, warped, paint smeared, and placed on the table. This, I said, was her kindness. And you let it be destroyed. No one spoke, but for once they listened. Back at home, I found Ava sitting at the kitchen table. A small canvas was in front of her, just blank, untouched. She looked at me with tired eyes. "Do you think they'll ever like my colors?" I sat beside her and placed her little hand in mine. "No," I whispered, "but you don't need them to." And then, finally, she reached for the blue. 2 days after the HOA meeting, just as I was beginning to feel like the world might swallow the truth whole, a plain, nondescript envelope appeared in our mailbox. No return address, no name, just my name scrawled on the front in shaky block letters. Inside was a USB drive and a folded sheet of paper with just 6 words written across the middle. She didn't know I was watching. My hands trembled as I walked back into the house. I sat at the kitchen table, heart thudding, and plugged the drive into my laptop. There was one file on it, labeled simply mailboxcam_0427.mp4. I clicked it. The footage began with a wide shot of the community mailbox area. The image was clear. Someone had a high-quality doorbell or driveway camera installed with a perfect angle of the sidewalk where Ava had been painting. I recognized her instantly, my daughter perched on her little stool, brush in hand, painting flowers at the base of the mailbox. She looked so small in the frame, so focused. Then Karen appeared. The video captured everything. The way she marched across the lawn, bucket in hand, the brief exchange of words, Ava looking up, startled. And then it happened. Karen raised the bucket above her head and deliberately tilted it forward, pouring the paint directly onto Ava. The camera caught it all. The splash, Ava falling, Karen's blank expression, her cold words afterward clear as day. She ruined the community's colors. I couldn't breathe. Tears streamed down my face, not just from heartbreak, but from the feeling that for the first time, the truth couldn't be denied. The world had to believe us now. I copied the video 3 times. One for the police, one for the HOA, and one to keep for when Ava asked me again if anyone ever stood up for her. I drove straight to the precinct and requested to speak to the officer in charge of Ava's case. When I showed him the footage, his entire demeanor changed. He stopped taking notes and started typing rapidly. "This is exactly what we needed," he said, jaw tight. "This is no longer hearsay. This is assault, caught on camera." Within the hour, they had reopened the case formally and informed me that charges were being reevaluated. Assault on a minor, potential hate crime enhancement, civil rights violation. The officer assured me that Karen would be notified. Then I forwarded the video to the HOA board. No more letters, no more polite complaints, just a direct message with the subject line, "In case you still think this was an accident." For the first time, I got a response within minutes. The board president asked for an emergency session. "We were unaware of the full extent," she wrote. "Please accept our apologies." But I didn't need their apologies. I needed their accountability. Later that night, a neighbor I barely knew, Mr. Hartley, the retired veteran who'd once nodded at Ava from afar, knocked gently on my door. When I opened it, he looked tired but firm. "I have a feeling you got that video from my camera," he said, not waiting for me to confirm. "I installed it years ago after a break-in. I've seen what she's done for weeks, and I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." I nodded, speechless. He added, "I gave it to you because it's time someone told the truth." Loudly. And now, finally we could. The video didn't just change the case, it changed everything. Less than 24 hours after submitting the footage to the police and the HOA, it leaked. I didn't share it publicly, but someone did. Maybe the neighbor who filmed it, maybe someone in the HOA trying to save face. Regardless, by the next morning, it was everywhere. The headline that spread across local news sites and social media read, "Caught on camera. HOA board member pours paint on disabled child over community colors dispute." Within hours, the story exploded. News vans began circling our block. Journalists called, emailed, even knocked on our door. National outlets picked it up. Disability rights activists began reposting the video with hashtags like #ProtectDisabledChildren and #HOA Horror. Ava's name wasn't mentioned, thank God, but the story of a 7-year-old girl with a mobility disability assaulted by a neighborhood HOA leader was spreading like wildfire. And then the public did what the community had failed to do. They stood up. Hundreds of people flooded the HOA's official page with outrage. Fire her immediately. You let this happen? Shame on all of you. That child is braver than every adult on your board. Disability isn't the problem. Your silence is. Petitions circulated demanding Karen's removal from any neighborhood authority. Local disability advocates organized a peaceful rally right outside the HOA building, holding signs with Ava's drawings printed on them. One read, "Her colors belong here." By the end of the week, the HOA board called a public meeting. I didn't attend out of fear Ava would be re-traumatized, but neighbors sent me videos. For the first time, Karen didn't show up with her clipboard and smirk. In fact, she didn't show up at all. The board voted unanimously to remove her from every official position. Her access to HOA decisions, events, and communication was revoked. They issued a formal public apology to Ava and our family. But the justice didn't stop there. The police filed formal charges, assault on a minor, battery, and civil rights violation based on disability. Karen was served a restraining order and scheduled for arraignment. Her lawyer made a weak attempt to claim the video lacked context, but the world had already seen what mattered. And perhaps most surprising of all, the community, the very people who had watched in silence for so long, finally began to speak. Mrs. Davison brought Ava a basket of art supplies and a hand-painted card that read, "You make this place brighter." The couple from 2 doors down offered to repaint the mural wall, with Ava, this time, with the HOA's permission. Even Mia's mom showed up at our door teary-eyed and said, "I'm sorry, I should have protected her too." For once, the weight of silence shifted from our shoulders to theirs. No punishment could ever erase the trauma Ava endured. No press conference or statement could undo the moment she cowered beneath a bucket of paint. But seeing the world say, "This is not okay," watching people defend her when it finally counted, that meant something. Justice, we realized, doesn't always come wrapped in laws or titles. Sometimes it comes in a voice that says, "We see you now, and we believe you." The first time Ava picked up a paintbrush again, it was quiet. No celebration, no announcement. Just her, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by new paints and fresh, untouched canvases. For days, the supplies had sat in the corner, unopened, gifts from neighbors, advocates, even strangers who'd heard her story and wanted her to know she was seen. She dipped the brush gently into yellow paint, then traced a soft arc across the canvas. A sun. A small, glowing sun, one she hadn't painted since before the incident. And when she looked up at me, her eyes held something I hadn't seen in weeks. Hope. A few days later, we received an invitation from a local arts nonprofit. They had followed Ava's story and wanted to commission a mural in her honor, her vision, her style, her colors. They had already chosen a wall in the heart of the city park, just beneath a shady grove where kids came to play and dream. The project was titled, "No One Can Paint Over Her Light." Ava chose the theme herself. It was bold, colorful, filled with swirling stars, butterflies with crutches, handprints of every shade, and at the center, a little girl with a paintbrush standing tall beside her walker, surrounded by a halo of flowers. When she finished the mural, the community held a small gathering. Not a press event, just people who cared. Teachers, kids, neighbors who once turned away, now stepped forward with flowers, hugs, and words they should have said long ago. Ava didn't say much that day, but As she stood in front of her painting, one hand on her walker, one still streaked with pink paint, she smiled. Not the smile of someone who had forgotten what happened, but the smile of someone who had survived it. Someone who was no longer afraid to be seen. And as I stood behind her, watching the world finally reflect the beauty I'd always known lived inside her, I realized something. Karen had tried to cover Ava in shame, but Ava had turned it into art, and no one, no matter how cruel, no matter how powerful, was ever going to paint over her light again. If this story made your heart ache or made your fists clench, then you already understand the truth. What happened to Ava isn't just one isolated horror. It's a reflection of a much bigger, much quieter problem. When neighborhoods start caring more about paint swatches and community aesthetics than about human beings, especially disabled children, something is deeply broken. But stories like Ava's remind us that silence doesn't have to win. That one voice, one camera, one act of courage can spark change. If you've ever been made to feel like you didn't belong because of your body, your child, your differences, I want you to know you're not alone. And you don't have to stay silent. Share your story in the comments. Let others know they're not crazy for feeling like the rules were stacked against them. Let's build a space where we get to define what a real community looks like, one that lifts people up instead of tearing them down. And if you want more stories like this, real stories of injustice, of courage, of standing up when no one else would, make sure you subscribe to the HOA Stories. Because it's time we stop pretending these neighborhoods are perfect. It's time we start telling the truth. And it's time the people who think they can bully others into silence finally learn we're not going anywhere. Not quietly. Not ever again.